So my name is Achinoam. I'm 43 years old. I have 3 children, which are my greatest achievements. 11 and a half, 8. 8 and 2.5. Yeah, I'm a mother of 3. I'm very proud to say. The rest is secondary. I'm also a singer and songwriter. I started as a songwriter, actually. We were talking about that we spent a short time, Joseph and I, in the same school, and we went to the same choir. The guy who was our choir leader had a great impact on my life. He was the first person that listened to my songs. I started writing songs when I was maybe 7 years old. I lived inside these songs because I was a very reclusive young girl. I had glasses, thick glasses. I can hardly see, actually, thanks to contact lenses. I had braids. I never wanted to fix my teeth. And I was the only Yemenite kid in the yeshiva. Yeah, so my parents were Yemenite Jews, moved to the United States, and they were very nervous about my brother and I, my sister was not yet around, losing our Israeli identity. The only option was a religious Jewish school. We were not religious at home. Actually, we lived in a pretty grungy part of the Bronx, not even in the nice part of Riverdale, to your question. We lived around Van Cortlandt Park, and it was a pretty bad neighborhood. And I thought it was a great neighborhood because I had lots of friends in Puerto Rican and African American. We called them black kids then. And we played around a lot. And then on the other hand, I was in a yeshiva with a lot of Ashkenazi Jewish kids, which were mostly from very rich families and religious. I had nothing to do with these people. And then my family was a traditional Yemenite home. So, we had pillows on the floor. To that extent, I would never, ever even dream of inviting any of my friends home. So that was, I could say that was a huge identity mess up. And that's the reason I started writing songs. I lived in my songs. I could write anything that I wanted in these songs. I was a bookworm. I loved the English language. I learned to speak it fluently at a very young age and read it. To this day, it's my stronger language. I could speak it better than my parents, obviously, so I had a one-up on them for a while there. In fact, my father was doing his PhD in chemical engineering in Columbia University. When I was 10, I started helping him out with his papers so that they would be written more fluently. And my father's a wonderful guy, but English was never his big thing. Anyway, so I wrote songs, and then Avshalom Katz, the choir leader, was the first guy who listened to my songs and gave me an incredible amount of support. He loved them. I was not the soloist of the choir, actually, but he did give me all this love, and he took me to a professional recording studio and helped me record my song at the age of 12. And that's when I first started doing that. At the same time, I was very interested in math and physics. I was very good at math and physics. I was lousy at literature and everything else. I loved to read, but I didn't like to study about reading. I didn't understand why you have to analyze a book. You just read it and enjoy it. Why do you need to understand why this guy said that guy? I just couldn't stand it. So I also don't really understand, in general, I'd much rather make art and enjoy art than talk about art, but anyway. But math and physics I really liked. And so I thought that I would study that in university, but it didn't work out that way. When I was 15 years old, I came to Israel on summer vacation. I went on a trip in the mountains with some other friends from New York. And in Israel, I'm sure whoever's not from Israel, I don't know if you know, but every hiking trip where youth are involved, there needs to be somebody that has some kind of a weapon, normally a soldier or a reserve soldier or a parent with a license to bear weapons. In the case of this trip I was on, there was a soldier there. He was on leave. He was an officer who was just had a week break, and he decided to come on this trip. And I fell in love with him. Totally. To the extent that I was willing to go to the moon to convince my parents that I was a Zionist and that I had to go back to where I was born, even though I had no recollection whatsoever where I was born. And I never, ever wanted to be in Israel before that, because every time we came on summer vacation, I was like, who are these crude and crass people? I mean, I don't want to have any, and it's hot here, and I sweat. No, I want to go back to New York. But now, all I wanted was Zionism and blah, blah, blah. So my parents actually bought into that for a while. and the Sochnut and Tzofim helped me, whatever. I made Aliyah by myself for love. It wasn't to go to the army. I ended up in the army, but it was for love. For love. Love is the only good reason to do anything anyway. And actually, I ended up marrying that guy, by the way, and he's the father of the 3 children that we mentioned at the beginning. Yeah. So I guess it has a happy end. There's a happy end. I encountered an enormous culture shock when I came here for the first time. I just didn't understand anything about this country to begin with. It took me a long time to figure out what was going here. The truth is, that's a mistake. I have still not yet figured out what is going on here. I'm still working on it. Yeah, it's very, very complicated. Israel and living in Israel has had a huge impact on my creative world, and this is getting around more to your question. To begin with, I didn't speak Hebrew very well when I came here. I started learning Hebrew through poetry mostly. I loved reading, and I still love reading poetry. I became enamored of this poet called Leah Goldberg. I felt that her songs resonated with my soul 100%. And if I could write in Hebrew, that's exactly what I would write. My first successful album here in Israel was an album of her songs that I put to music. My most well-known songs here probably are from that album, like Boy Kala, Keren Or, those songs. From the same project, it was part of the Israel Festival at the time, Uri, a song by Rachel, again, a very well-known and very poignant, beautiful, iconic. Yeah, she wants me to sing. Calm yourself down, y'all. All right. So anyway, but of course, I'm a singer-songwriter, so I write about the intricacies of the soul in all of their myriad variations. So Leah Goldberg was a great instrument for that in the Hebrew language. I've done it in English on other albums. I connect my Yemenite root to almost everything I do because my grandmother was my nanny when I was growing up. My parents worked very hard, both of them. I was raised by my grandmother. My grandma's an amazing woman. She's still around. She's 88. I love her. I'm actually going to see her today. And she had a huge impact on me. She taught me songs that I still sing in my concerts. She's a very strong woman. I guess I got that from her. She taught me how to play basic percussion because many women in Yemen used to do that and still do. And I do that extensively in my concerts. I play percussion. And so I do have those three things. Leah Goldberg said, Shorashai b'shne nofim shonim. I translate that, my roots on both sides of the sea. And that has maybe become the sentence. I just want to say one more thing. I've connected, basically Israel to my realm. As an Israeli artist, when I started being successful outside of Israel, I was not aware of what it meant to be an Israeli artist outside of Israel. I actually did not want to be an any place artist. I just wanted to represent nothing, the land of me. That was what I wanted to be in. This little place or a virtual place or a nothing place, a place of the soul that belongs to everybody. But that was not given to me. I didn't have that privilege. I could probably have taken it very forcefully by constantly pushing away my identity, every interview, and every conversation, with every opportunity, but I could not do that. My conscience would not enable me to do that. So right at the start, I'm talking at the age of 21 already, 22, I made a decision that I would not put my head in the sand and I would lift my head high and first of all start learning more about what was going on here, forming a solid opinion, and then acting upon that opinion. So from a young age, I became involved politically. Not politically as in a political party. I don't belong to any political party, but I became very interested in trying to present a very humanistic, pluralistic, liberal side of Israel in keeping with my own views, and which resonate, I think, with many, many people that live here, not only here, but in the entire Middle East. I've paid a very high price for that throughout the years. And the problem is twofold. In Israel, people, unfortunately, tend to not like their artists to be politically involved in any way. Even though all of my heroes, like Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez and Paul Simon, all these people were always politically involved. And I think that throughout history, artists were always politically involved, and they led revolutions, and they stated their opinions because that's part of the integral essence of art. That's the way I see it anyway. But in Israel, people don't like that. And outside of Israel, it's also complicated. I've encountered a lot of resistance to the way that I've chosen to do things. Also support, but also resistance, and normally from both sides. I mean, whether it be right or left. But being as I'm stubborn, what I inherited from my grandmother, and also just because I cannot function otherwise, my conscience will not allow me, I plow on. So that's my take on being an Israeli artist. We have a lot to draw from in this country, all the diversity and the beauty and the complexity of it. And then we also have a lot to deal with as we step out of here.
Thank you, Achinoam. And you know, if we could take a show of hands of how many among us were afraid to take friends home as children and then grew up to be independent personalities and creative across the board. Probably everyone's hand would go up. Last in our group, Rivka Saker, who is chairman of Sotheby's Israel and a director of Sotheby's Worldwide. Rivka, as I mentioned, and I are a little bit different from the others in the panel because we are not creators. We are observers, analysts, and in a way, purveyors of art or of the arts. In Rivka's case, Rivka was born in Tel Aviv. She lives now between Tel Aviv and New York. Her life has been about, in the first instance, all of the arts, then a focus at Sotheby's, where she did Israel a great service by helping to build Sotheby's in Israel, but then even more importantly, taking Sotheby's Israeli art sales to New York. This has been a very important point for visual art from here out in the rest of the world. But separately, what she's done by founding an organization called Art is to bring the arts in Israel to the attention of the rest of the world by taking artists from here worldwide, but then by bringing artists, curators, critics, and writers to Israel to experience Israeli culture in this landscape. Also very important. So, Rivka.
So, thank you, James. I really feel it's a very difficult act to follow these great artists all sitting on the panel here. And as James said, my background is different. I was born in 1950. My parents were Holocaust survivors. My father was a partisan. My mother came to Israel after she was released in Bergen-Belsen. And again, it goes back to the same things, that you grow up in an immigrant family and actually try to speak Hebrew, but at home, no one really speaks Hebrew yet. And I think maybe you're right, James. This was part of the strength that you gain when you really have to fight and find your own way out of home. In the years later, I studied the history of art and did a lot of things, worked in the cinema and was running the Israel Film Archives, and in a certain stage had a gallery, and it was all quite quick and fast. And then at a certain age, when I had my gallery, was offered to be involved in opening Sotheby's office in Israel, and it was a big kind of debate. Should I go with it? I was just starting my own family. And I said, you know, this is such a great opportunity. I just cannot let it go. I should try. If it will be too much, I can always leave, but I just have to take this opportunity. And soon after, 2 years later, we did our first Israeli art sale here in Jerusalem. It was 1986. The first sale was kind of revolutionary because it was the first time that there was a catalog of Israeli art actually distributed internationally, sending thousands of copies to collectors around the world and all different art institutes that get this catalog. And it did a big thing, but the sales were in Israel, and most of our clients were Israeli and local. Through years later, almost 20 years later, after we had sales regularly, in 2003, it was more like the middle of the second Intifada, but also Sotheby's as an organization decided to center its sales in the main centers. And there was the decision, should the Israeli art sale be in London or New York, or what should we do? And we decided to go to New York because we felt that's where we could have a better response and maybe more collectors interested in Israeli art. But I think the thing that really encouraged me to do it is that through my life, since I was 15, I had a lot of friends who were artists, and I could really feel the lack of institutional help in Israel to artists. I mean, the different countries like England have the British Council, the Germans have the Goethe Institute, the French Institute. Israel has a little department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that sometimes pays the artist for the tickets, but there is no real help to expose and promote Israeli art internationally. So I thought to take this opportunity of moving the sale to New York to create something that started as an Israeli Art Week in New York and very quickly turned into Artiz, which is the organization that James meant, and is really working now to promote and expose Israeli art internationally. This is to the visual art. We have different programs of grant programs for exhibitions of Israeli art internationally, and we try to help the big exhibitions, if it's biennials or Documenta or others, to have better, the artists should have better or more money to actually execute their dream work. But we also felt that, as James mentioned, post the year 2000, there was a generation which had completely a different outreach. It was the first, Israel first had television, I think in '68, and it was one channel. And here was the first generations that grew up on TV imagery. Suddenly, the video art, the multimedia, the photography, it was a generation that had the same background as kids in other places in the world. So the technology was there, and they learned to use the technology in a very professional and really good way. And then, at the same time, they did manage to capture the local and continue to say it in a very, I would say, independent and personal way. And being so close to many of the artists, I felt it was really an opportunity to try and get it out. So one of the things we started to do is bring curators and artists and museum directors and writers to Israel. And actually, Sigalit was one, participated in our first event in 2004 in New York. And the first group of curators that we brought to Israel, one of the curators fell so much in love with her that 5 months later, she had the one-man show at MoMA. So it's not that it makes an immediate difference or such an immediate difference every time. This was a very special event. But this ongoing exposure has a great response. And what we see now, that for our next group of curators that we are going to bring in October, about 6 months ago, we had a waiting list of 180 people that wanted to join this group of 10 people. So we did something which is like an open call. And as a result, we got 75 applications of great people, and we don't know what to do first because we have to decide in the next few months. So I think it's working. And as in the visual arts, I think similar things are happening in all the rest of the media. I'm involved also in other cultural and art institute in Israel, and I see that, the more every international competition, there are Israelis winning the prizes, literary prizes are given to Israeli writers, one after the other. And music as well. I think there is a great response. And in today's situation, I think Israeli has technology and new media and high tech, but definitely and much more, I think, in a diverse way, maybe, or maybe it's just me thinking, art and culture to export and to show abroad.